video is for Unit 1, and we are going to talk about types of businesses. Now, in the previous video, we talked about types of business ownership, but this we are going to categorize our businesses. So one way to group them is by the types of activities that they perform in their business. First type of business that we're going to talk about is a producer. A producer is a business that's going to gather raw goods. Raw goods just mean that they are materials that are gathered in their original state from natural resources. So an example would be like land or water. Okay. Examples of producers would be agriculture, mining, fishing, and forestry. These are all businesses that are going to gather their raw good. Next, we have a processor. A processor is going to take raw materials and they are going to turn them into a more finished product. Now, notice how it says here, more finished, not necessarily finished, because we might have another step in becoming a finished product. Okay, so this is just more finished products. So they do show us some examples. A processor might be a business that takes sugar cane, which is the raw good, and then turns it into sugar. Or a business that takes crude oil and turns it into gasoline. Or the last example is taking iron and turning it into steel. Next, we have a manufacturer. A manufacturer is a business that makes finished products out of processed goods. So they are going to take those more finished products and they are going to finish those products and sell them off to consumers. Examples of this would be a business that makes cars or CDs or computers. Next, we have intermediaries and wholesalers. These are very similar, so make sure that you see the difference between the two. An intermediary is a business that moves goods from one business to another. What they're going to do is they're going to buy goods, they're going to store them, and then they're going to resell them. A wholesaler, or sometimes called a distributor, is simply going to distribute goods. They're going to buy large quantities. They're going to divide them up into smaller ones and then sell them to retailers. And we'll talk about next what a retailer is. Now, here's the thing is that with wholesalers, they don't always just sell to retailers. There are sometimes that we have wholesalers that sell directly to consumers. We might be able to buy online from a wholesaler or even things like Costco or Sam's Club. If you notice, when we go to those places, we have to buy larger quantities. Those quantities are not broken up into smaller ones where we would see at more retailers as a consumer. So next, like I said, we're going to talk about retailers and then also service businesses. A retailer is a business that purchases goods from a wholesaler and then sells them to consumers. Consumers are the final buyers of the goods. Consumers are the ones that are going to use the good. They aren't going to sell the good to anyone else. Okay. Examples would be like a service station or an auto dealer. Other examples that we might think of is like a Target or a Walmart. Okay, they're going to buy their goods from a wholesaler and then sell them to the consumer. Service businesses are going to perform tasks rather than provide a good. We should already know this because we are looking at a service business throughout this whole semester. So service business sells a task rather than a good. It's going to meet some type of need or provide some type of convenience for the customer. Service businesses actually employ about 3/4 of the workforce, and that number is increasing. So here's kind of a timeline on how we might see a good going from that producer all the way to that retailer, to that consumer even. So a producer, if we start with iron ore, a producer is going to gather that iron ore. Okay, that's the business that collects the iron ore. Then the ore is processed by a steel company. They would be the processor. The steel then is used at an automobile plant by a manufacturer. So they take the steel and make it into a car. The finished good, then, the car, is put up to sale by a retailer. So that would be, if we went to a car dealership, that would be our retailer. Okay, we are going to do an activity that's looking at the difference between these types of businesses. And we are going to do this in Microsoft Word or in a Google Doc. I'm going to go through Microsoft Word with you and a little bit through a Google Doc on how to create a table. So we're going to create a table that has 6 columns and 11 rows. And what we're doing is we're looking at the different types of businesses, and then I'm going to have different businesses that you need to match up. So this is going to be kind of what it's going to look like once we create it. I'm going to open up Microsoft Word and show you a couple of things about creating a table in Microsoft Word. You can definitely open up Microsoft Word and follow along if you want to, or you can just watch the video. Okay, when we are in Microsoft Word and we want to insert a table, I'm going to go to my Insert tab at the top left. And underneath that, I'm going to see the option of Table. And I have quite a bit of different ways that I can insert a table. First of all, I can point to these squares, and then this allows me to put in a number of rows and columns. So right now I have a 10 by 8 table. So that means 10 columns, 8 rows. I could also go to this here, and this is going to, if I know the exact number of columns and rows I want, I can put that in this way. I can also go to do a draw a table. This is convenient to use if we're going to use a table that's not, maybe the rows are not going to all be the same size or the columns aren't. Notice when I do that, I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. And now I have this pencil, and so I can drag in my different columns. I can change the size of those columns. I can drag some lines across to make my rows. What's nice about drawing too is, let's say that here I want this to be put into 2 rows, just this column here. I can draw that, or 2 columns here. I'm even able to put in a diagonal line. So drawing that table just allows me to put a more unique table. And then notice I can't really get rid of my pencil right now. So to do that, I'm going to just go up and I'm going to click where it says Draw Table. And now it allows me to get back to my cursor. If I decided I wanted to erase some lines, I'm going to go to my eraser there. And I'm just going to click on whatever lines I want to erase them. I'm going to shut that eraser off, and I'm just going to click on that again to turn that off. And then I'm going to select my whole table, and up here in the corner of my table, I can click on those 4 arrows, and I'm just going to delete that. I don't want to work with that right now, and I'm going to go back to my insert and my table, and I'm going to draw a 6 by 8. Now, when I think I need to put in a couple more rows of my table. So to do that, I can go into my last cell over here of my table, and I can just press Tab, and that will insert another row at the bottom of my table. The other thing that I can do is up here, I have Insert Above, Insert Below for my rows, or I could insert more columns by saying Insert Left or Insert Right. Now, if these options disappear, that's just because we've clicked outside of our table. So notice when I've clicked outside of my table, I don't have my table options located up here anymore. I need to just go back and click inside my table again to get those options back. I'm going to go to my Table Design tab, and I'm going to look here, and I have different table styles that I can choose from. So this just allows me to put a little flair on my table with one quick click. I could change all of my shading individually for each row if I wanted to. This just allows me to do it pretty quickly. let's say, I don't know, maybe this first cell here, I'm selecting it. And so I'm going to point to the left and I get that black arrow and I'm going to click to select that cell. And then I might go to my shading and I might change the shading of that one to yellow. So that's just how I can change that quickly. I can also change the borders. Right now, since I have that border style, it already has those selected. But I can change the thickness of the border and the style of the border as well. So here's thickness. This one is my style of my border. And notice now it looks like a paintbrush with my cursor. And if I click on lines, it then changes that border. Now, to get rid of that, I'm still going to have that paintbrush. To get rid of that, I'm just going to go up here and click on my border painter to get rid of that option. I'm going to go to my layout tab. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my text direction. And so one of the things you're going to have to do is have the types of businesses. So I'm going to just put producer and processor just so that we can see the text alignment. And I'm going to actually make this row larger. So to do that, notice when I point to the border between those two rows, I get the line with the two arrows. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag down, and that makes my row quite a bit larger. This will help me see what happens when I change my alignment. So here is my different alignment. So I can center it, or I could have it to the top left. Here's the middle, top right. Here's the middle left, here's centered, middle right. So I have different ways that I can align my text within the cell. I can also change my text direction by clicking on this one here. So if I want my text to go sideways, I could do that. I kind of showed you how I can change the size of my row. I can also do that with my column. So here I'm going to point to the border between my two columns. And I'm going to click and I'm going to drag to change that. Now, notice it didn't change it much because I have text within that on the next cell, and so I couldn't make it much smaller. So it might depend on what we have within our column. I can also change that here, and so this changes the row height and this changes the column width. Okay, I think that that's all I wanted to go over with you on tables. You are now going to use this, and this will be posted on Google Classroom, but you are going to be creating this table. These are your businesses over here on the left. These are your types of businesses, and for each one, you are going to put an X in the cell that it matches up with. So the first one's done for you. An oil refinery is a processor. I'll do the next one with you, a fishing fleet. A fishing fleet would be considered a producer. Okay, you can go ahead and do that activity. It can be found on Google Classroom.